There are currently 86 items in Risk of Rain 2, each with their own benefits and some even with some downsides. But which of these items are the actual best? Today I'm going to be going over my personal top 10 items in Risk of Rain 2. Again, let me re-emphasize these are my personal choices for the top 10 items. However, I think most people will agree that some of these items are definitely better than others. So with that being said, here are my top 10 items in Risk of Rain 2. We will not be counting equipment.
P.S. Make sure to like and subscribe if you want more content like this. Also, I stream over at Twitch TV/R&D Thursday, so check that out too. Alright, here's the video.
Numero uno is the ATG missile. The ATG missile is one of the best items in Risk of Rain 2 simply because it outputs an insane amount of damage, unlike any other item in the game. If you've ever seen me play or watch me stream, Twitch TV/R&D Thursday by the way, then you probably know that I love mentioning the fact that the ATG missile does total damage and not your damage. You see, in Risk of Rain 2, most items actually use your base damage towards the calculation of how much damage that item's gonna do. But the ATG missile is one of the very few exceptions to this rule. So say you do 30 damage per click. If you have an ATG missile proc on any of your clicks, then you would be doing 300% of 30. Now, if you do 30 damage in crit, which doubles your damage, then the ATG missile does 300% of 60 damage. What makes this even better is that the ATG missile itself can proc. And if it can proc, it can crit. So now you have a rocket that does 300% of 60 damage, critting to do double that damage. What becomes even crazier is the fact that the ATG missile itself can proc itself. So you have 60 damage, plus 300% damage, plus the crit of whatever that damage is. I'm not going to do the math, I suck in math. And then that rocket itself can proc another ATG, which then of course it could crit. And theoretically this would go down the line infinitely, theoretically.
That's a lot of damage. How about a little more?
My point is, ATG missile has big damage and it's one of the best items in the game if you're just doing an insane amount of damage. Number 2, we have the ukulele. Now, the ukulele is obviously one of the best items in Risk of Rain 2. With a 25% chance to fire chain lightning for 80% total damage, remember that from the ATG missile, on up to 3 + 2 per stack targets within 20 meters. So much like the ATG missile, this is a great damage item because it does total damage and not base damage, and it will chain your attacks. This makes the ukulele one of the best AoE damage items in the game, as it's 1 in 4 chance for you to proc a chain lightning of 80% of your total damage, again remember total damage, so these are big numbers here, to other targets. And with a proc coefficient of 0.2, it can actually proc other items as well, even itself. 0.2 is a much lower number than a 1.0 proc coefficient, but it's still good considering that you have so many enemies to hit. I mean, it's 3 and then plus 2 per stack, so just getting 2 ukuleles means you have 5 chances to proc. It is a pretty insane AoE item and is one of the items that will make any player cry tears of joy. Alright, third on the list, we have the old guillotine. One of the best items in the game, of course, as it has made this list. The old guillotine is an item that allows you to execute elite enemies once they reach a certain threshold. Upon getting 1 old guillotine, you will be able to instantly kill elite monsters below 20% health. Although not actually 20% health because it diminishes and it's really weird. It's hyperbolic, I believe, is what the wiki's telling me right now. But it starts off at 16% and then it goes up from there. Because it is hyperbolic, it does not actually stack plus 20% health per stack of your guillotine. It'll be much smaller numbers. You're not going to get 5 and then be able to insta-kill an elite. However, Old Guillotine is still one of the best items in the game, considering it allows you to execute elites. And of course, elites have exponentially more health than their non-elite counterparts, and when you get later in the game, 90% of the enemies are going to be elites. I'll leave a table on the screen of how many guillotines you need to reach a certain threshold, but it would take you over 100 to reach the 95% threshold, and the first one is only worth 16%. So keep that in mind, 5 guillotines does not equal 100% execute on elite monsters. Sorry, gamers. Number 4 on the list, we have Razor Wire. Now, I know a lot of people are probably going to go, wait, hold on, Razor Wire? What the But I think that Razor Wire is extremely good because there are several ways in the game where you can use Razor Wire as a better guillotine. But before that, let's get into what Razor Wire does. Razor Wire causes a burst of razors upon taking damage, that each deal 165% damage to up to 5 targets, plus 2 per stack, in a 25 meter range, which you could increase by plus 10 per stack of Razor Wire. Alright, so now you're probably thinking, wait, Razor Wire needs you to take damage before it does damage? That sucks! Except for the fact that fall damage counts, which is really good if you want to have controlled damage, as fall damage can never kill you, and self-damage sources also count. So for a Rex who can control how he gets damaged and can heal up nearly immediately, Razor Wire is extremely powerful and actually better than the ukulele in his case. Also, if you get the Hellfire Tincture, which is a lunar equipment, then you can automatically proc this whenever you want, as the damage that the Hellfire Tincture does will cause it to proc on nearby enemies. Also, Razor Wire has a better proc coefficient than the ukulele with 0.5 compared to the ukulele's 0.2, while also hitting more enemies. This means that you can go absolutely proc crazy with the Razor Wire where you couldn't with the ukulele. And finally, why I believe this item is also really great, you don't have to wait on chance for this to proc. All you have to do is hurt yourself. Personally, whenever I have Razor Wire, I walk in the puddles of flame that spawn from Flame Elites, and I basically kill everything that isn't that Flame Elite. Tanky survivors especially can utilize this, and even an engineer who puts his turrets in dangerous locations can proc Razor Wire a bunch. And that's it for my propaganda on Razor Wire. Let's now talk about number 5, which is Wax Quail. Now, I feel like the Wax Quail is probably going to get the most hate out of every other item on the list because people probably don't think it does that much. However, this is the best mobility item in the game. Not only does it allow you to dodge Titan Beams, which is insanely powerful, especially later on in the game when Titan Beams will take you out of the game, Wax Quail allows you to dodge so much stuff, and you get around the map so much faster. All you need is one, which is really rare for an item in Risk of Rain 2, where it requires stacking multiple. A Wax Quail only needs one Wax Quail to be useful. There's really not much else to the item other than giving you big hops, so I can't really talk about it at length. However, I do believe it is the best mobility item and deserves its place on this list. Numero 6, Brilliant Behemoth. The Brilliant Behemoth is a red item in Risk of Rain 2, aka a legendary item, which means it's pretty freaking good. The Brilliant Behemoth causes all of your attacks to explode in a 4 meter range plus 2.5 meters per stack for a bonus 60% total damage to nearby enemies. This makes the Brilliant Behemoth one of the best AoE items in the game, as every single attack is an explosion. There is no chance involved, you will always have 60% extra total damage to nearby enemies once you hit them. This makes it an extremely consistent damage bonus and a pretty decent AoE. The only downside to this item is that it does not proc, and it is pretty small AoE for being a legendary item. That being said, it is still one of the greatest items in the game, and therefore it's on this list. Number 7, Shattering Justice. After hitting an enemy 5 times, reduce their armor by 60 for 8 plus 8 per stack seconds. Now, a lot of you probably have no idea about armor in Risk of Rain 2. Some enemies have some enemies have none. I'll be putting what the armor values are on the screen right now, and you'll be able to see how much damage it does with this much armor and without this much armor, but there's a lot more to it, essentially. But just for simplicity's sake, let's say an enemy has 0 armor, and you give them negative 60 from Shattering Justice. They now take almost 40% more damage. I don't know about you, but when an enemy is taking 40% more damage from an item that all it requires me to do is hit them 5 times, that's a pretty good item. Alright, item number 8, we've got Gesture of the Drowned. This is the one and only lunar item making it on this list, and if you don't know what a lunar item is, it is essentially just an item that costs lunar coins and has a trade-off for a very powerful effect. For example, Gesture of the Drown's effect is it reduces your cooldown of your equipment by 50%, but requires that you use it every time that it's off cooldown. So let's say you have a 100-second cooldown on your equipment, you will now only have 50-second cooldown, but every time that 50 seconds comes up, the Gesture of the Drown automatically makes you use your equipment. Now, the Gesture of the Drown isn't always the best item to get when you are toting equipment. For example, the Crowdfunder is not going to have any effect on Gesture of the Drown. The Foreign Fruit, which heals you whenever you want, has a pretty low cooldown, and using it willy-nilly doesn't really help you that much. And even the Prion Accumulator, which is a very powerful equipment, isn't going to be as good as when you could choose when to use it, because it has such a large cooldown, even with the Gesture of the Drown's 50% cooldown reduction. My personal favorite equipment to use when I have a Gesture of the Drown is the Disposable Missile Launcher and the Royal Capacitor. The Disposable Missile Launcher is basically a free fireworks every time that your Gesture of the Drown causes it to go on cooldown. And with Royal Capacitor, probably the best item with this, you actually only use the Royal Capacitor when you're aiming at an enemy. So this means you have some more control over when the item procs, but it has a 50% cooldown reduction at all times. There's other things that make Gesture of the Drown even better. For example, Multi can have 2 equipment slots and it affects both, but he can swap in and out whichever one he wants to activate at that time. You can also stack Gesture of the Drowns for more cooldown reduction, although it won't be as dramatic as the first Gesture of the Drown. Alright, number 9, Tougher Times. Is this the only white item I have on here? I think this is the only white item I have on here. Tougher Times is the best white item in my opinion, because it blocks damage entirely. By this I mean that the Tougher Times will block whatever damage that you take initially. So for example, if you were getting hit by a Flame Elite, it would block the damage from the hit, but it would also prevent you from being ignited as well. I personally believe that you're probably going to think that the Tougher Times is the best item in the game once it saves you enough times. All it will take is for you to be caught in a Vagrant Explosion one too many times, and for your Tougher Times to block it, for you to realize how powerful this item is. There are a few things to know about the Tougher Times, however. For example, it is one of the few items in the game that are hyperbolic, and we've already talked about one. Hyperbolic stacking essentially just means it will never reach 100%, aka even if you had a million Tougher Times, you would not be 100% damage block. I will leave the chance to block damage on the screen right now. As you can see, having 100 only gives you 93%, while having 255 only gives you an extra 4% on top of that. And finally, Tougher Times is one of the only items in the game that is unaffected by luck. This means that Tougher Times will not be affected by the 57-leaf clover trying to proc it. Even so, having only 5 Tougher Times gives you a 42% chance to block damage, nearly half, so you won't be dying anytime soon. Alright, number 10, the final item in Risk of Rain 2. This was done in no particular order, but 57-leaf clover is the best item in Risk of Rain 2. And for those of you who don't know what the 57-leaf clover is, it is a very difficult item to get. You need to complete the long road. The 57-leaf clover makes all random effects roll 1 extra time plus 1 per stack of 57-leaf clovers for a favorable outcome. What this means is that if you don't proc an item, say a ukulele, your 57-leaf clover will roll again in an attempt to get you to proc that ukulele. Also, it will block any negative effects, for example, you being lit on fire by a fire elite. It will try to roll again and try to get you not procced on. What's even better about the 57-leaf clover is that the successes are measured per effect, not in a whole. I read that from the wiki. So if one item roll is successful, other items that were triggered by the same proc will continue to roll if unsuccessful. In other words, if your ukulele doesn't proc, it will roll, try to get your ukulele to proc. If your ukulele then procs another item, say an ATG missile, and that ATG missile then tries to proc ukulele and does not proc ukulele, the clover will then roll again. Essentially, the 57-leaf clover will work in proc chains. I really don't know how else to explain it. Not good at that. Now, I'm sure a lot of you are probably like, What? 57 leaf clover? How is that the best item in Risk of Rain 2? You need other items for this item to even work! And while yes, that is true, fellow gamer, being able to double the proc chance of items that otherwise can't increase their proc chance is actually an insane idea. An ATG missile can only proc 10% of the time and can never increase that proc chance other than having a 57 leaf clover, which will increase it to above 20%, I believe. And because this goes for literally every item that has a proc chance in your inventory, it multiplies the effectiveness of whatever you have in your inventory at the time that you pick up the 57 leaf clover. And of course, if you ever pick up any other item, then the 57 leaf clover will also improve those chances as well. So while no, the 57 leaf clover by itself is not the best item in the game, it's much like steroids, whereas it improves your overall performance, but you still gotta lift the fucking weights. And that's it. Those are the 10 items that I believe are the best items in Risk of Rain 2. If you don't agree, or you would like to just leave a nice little comment below, please do that. Make sure to like and subscribe if you like the video. See you later.
Everybody ask me how I know. I smiled at them and said she told me so. Everybody ask me how I know.